I don't know who needs to hear this, but if we haven't figured out the correlation between human beings and nature, then we are going to continue to be very unkind, unpleasant, disgruntled, emotionally dysregulated people. Now, I'm not trying to sell you here on an idea. I'm rather reminding you of something that is already within you that probably just has to wake up once more. You see, there are many facets of our relationship when it comes to us and nature. Right down to the science and even medical analyses by certain doctors. For example, medical doctors in Japan will prescribe nature and the outdoors to patients who are depressed. Whereas in other societies, it's not. And even when you look at the grand scheme of things, you don't see any advertising, any marketing for the outdoors unless it's a company like REI, for example, that will promote the outdoors. But at the same time, they're trying to get you to buy a product into having you believe that's the only way you can be able to explore and enjoy the outdoors. Let's get to the semantics of when you're out in nature and what it does to you on an emotional and mental point of view. When you're out in these spaces, it almost gives you a factory reset for your central nervous system, depending on how long you spend your time out here. It will also help reduce and lower your cortisol, which is a stress hormone. That's why people feel much better after leaving beautiful spaces like where I'm at. And then from there, they're able to think clearly. They're able to feel a little bit more clear. The burdens of everyday living tend to not be so heavy, because that's all what these constructs are. They're all just man-made, and they tend to put a weird barrier. You know, the whole saying of a gorilla that just sits on your chest, and until you do something, or until you go somewhere, or you experience something, or until it gets resolved, that's the only time when that weight is off of your chest. And sometimes it's done in a way where it's active, where we're actually taking the action. Other times it's passive, where something or someone does it for us, or enough time has passed by and we don't feel that way anymore. But because of the other facets that we're involved with on a day-to-day basis, such as work, school, survival, and the fact that we are doing those things at a much higher capacity than we had done in the past, and especially the generations before us. It gets to a point where we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to live with, and what are we willing to live without? Because in order to go to these places, aside from having the hope, dream, and desire, you need to have the resources. You have to have the means of getting here. You have to carve out the time, but more importantly, you have to have the willingness and an open mind and an open heart to really understand the internal benefits of what this can do for you. Now, aside from being too busy or just not being interested at all, there's really no benefit, especially when it comes to a physical, monetary point of view. Because compared to someone who would go to the gym, there's a physical result, right? There's the muscle growth, the weight loss, the transformation in one's physical appearance. Compared to out here, I'm not gaining anything physically, maybe some sensory, right? When I touch a plant or I feel something like a rock. And there might be the visual aesthetic, the landscape, the beauty, not being around noisy, busy people, inhaling fresh air. But it's definitely just one of those things that you have to really live it, you have to experience it, to know what it is that if the examples of what I'm talking about doesn't make sense, then hopefully the examples of what someone else can share with you will. Now, I know that there's also a population of people who would make every other excuse aside from time, money, and resources into getting here, as far as not liking bugs, not liking the temperature, not liking that there's no easy, accessible amenities, no running water or electricity. I hate to say it, but those folks have emotional resistance, and they haven't truly embraced the outdoors as their primitive self of being a human being. All I have to say is, if you want to really improve how you not even just perceive the world, but even perceive yourself, you'll want to try to make space to come to these spaces right here. And there doesn't have to be a certain agenda or a certain asset that you have to gain out of it. Maybe it's about just breaking up the pattern of your own frequency of eat, sleep, work, and repeat. Maybe it's about putting a glitch within your own matrix to where every day doesn't feel like a mundane task of constant repetitive motions of what you do, of what we do. And there's other things that could happen too in time. Everyone's journey is unique and different. And something that you might gain from one visit is going to be far different than what somebody else would experience on their own. But if you're already someone who's out here like this, like how I am, then all you can do is encourage people, invite people, give them a reason of why they would probably want to miss out on this gathering or this event or going to this place that they normally go to every day, like a restaurant or whatever, just giving a very bare example. And maybe they could find their way and immerse themselves back into nature eventually on their own. I think everyone should really take the time and chance to learn a little bit more about themselves by trekking out to these spaces and seeing what they experience, seeing what they feel. I hope this video reaches out to the right person. I hope this gives you, or even just reminds you of, like I said earlier, of something that is already within you that just needs to be awakened once again.